time for Woman in the Fifth with, as you say, our obligatory Kristen Scott Thomas film.
Yeah, we always have a Kristen Scott Thomas, vaguely French-based art house film to review in my experience, and here is this week's one. It's a really complicated international conglomerate of stuff. I think it's a British, Polish, French co-production. The director is Pavel Pawlikowski, I hope they've got that right, who made the rather good film My Summer of Love a few years ago, which was
Seven years ago, and this is his first film since then.
Yeah, which was a really nice British film about a romance between two young women, and was very good, I thought. This is a completely different kettle of fish. And it's adapted from a novel by Douglas Kennedy, who's American, so it's all very confusing. It is about an American writer, played by Ethan Hawke, who goes to Paris to try and track down his ex-wife and his daughter, and there's been something bad has gone on between him and his ex-wife because he's not supposed to go anywhere near her, and she immediately calls the police as soon as he arrives in her apartment and tries to get rid of him, and he flees, and he then ends up going away, and he gets robbed on a bus, and he ends up with nothing, no money, nothing. So in desperation he goes to a cafe in the middle of somewhere outskirts of Paris, desperately pleads for them in this horrible beaten up old place to give him a room. They give him a room for free and just gives him his passport, and then various things happen, and in the end he's on a kind of weird journey trying to work out what's going on in his life. You don't quite know what's happening with him and whether he's hallucinating or things that are happening are real. Then he goes to this party, he goes to a bookshop and he meets the guy who runs the bookshop, invites him to a literary party full of pretentious writers like him. He is a pretentious writer, and he meets Kristen Scott Thomas, as you'll hear in this clip.
You are a writer, aren't you?
Everyone here seems to be a writer.
Yes. But you are different.
Oh, no, thank you.
In fact, you remind me of my husband. He was also a novelist. And not a very happy one, either. Which was part of his charm.
Should I know his name?
Not unless you're familiar with Hungarian writers.
I know a couple.
Zoltán Kadó. He wasn't widely appreciated in your country. Or anywhere else, for that matter. I was his muse. And his translator, which was a thankless task.
Beware any film where someone says, I was his muse. That's my rule. And so there we have Kristen Scott Thomas, who in this film, we're used to her speaking French. Like, she gets cast in a lot of French films because she's bilingual and speaks brilliant French. In this film, she's got subbed with that rather odd posh accent. She's playing a Hungarian-British-French mix. Cool. And she's speaking, at one point, in the rest of that conversation, she says, how many languages do you speak? She says, 7. I picked them up along the way. There are a lot of kind of very pretentious conversations that go along like that.
How much of it's in French and how much is in English?
It's probably about half and half, and he speaks a lot of French, rather annoyingly, with his annoying American accent. I thought him speaking French got on my nerves rather a lot. It's one of those films. It's kind of has pretensions of being profound and weighty and important. The initial premise, as explained rather clunkily by me, is quite interesting. You kind of do want to know what happened between him and his wife and his daughter. You do want to know whether the things that are happening are real or whether it's a bit Roman Polanski, like classic Roman Polanski Repulsion, something like that, or
frantic if it's set in Paris.
You don't know what's happening. Is it in his mind? Is it real? So all of that's kind of vaguely interesting. It's quite nicely filmed, and it's interesting to see the outskirts of Paris. There's one shot of the Eiffel Tower in the background. Apart from that, it's a very kind of gritty, grim version of Paris, which you don't see that often. And, I love Kristen Scott Thomas. She can do no wrong. Unfortunately, it's kind of all a bit boring. It's only about 85 minutes long, and yet it feels like about 2.5 hours to me. It's very slow. A lot of repetitious shots of like insects in the forest. It's supposed to be meaningful and representing something or other. And the ending is infuriating. I won't obviously give anything away, but there's a kind of air of mystery about the whole thing, and there's a crime that's committed at one point. But in the end, oh dear, I just wanted to throw I was infuriated.
Well, we've seen Ethan Hawke mooching around Paris before, in Before Sunset. How does it compare?
Yeah, we have seen him mooching around. Actually, I think he's quite well cast here because he is himself a novelist, so he will understand some of the problems that the novelist character is having here. Obviously, he's got a certain amount of writer's block. It seems that Pavel Pawlikowski himself, when writing the screenplay, had a writer's block, then discovered this novel which was covering something of the same ground that he was sort of working on in the script. So then he adopted various bits of the novel, but it's not a straight adaptation by any means, so he just took the bits he wanted. And as Boyd says, the problem with it is there are all sorts of quirky things in it, but you wonder what they all amount to. I mean, for instance, he ends up living in this kind of above this Turkish cafe, so all the people in the cafe speak Turkish amongst themselves, but the beautiful blonde girl who works behind the counter and appears to be the partner of the Turkish guy who owns the cafe is Polish for no reason whatsoever. and is gorgeous for no reason whatsoever, except that it may all be inside his head. It may be that apart from the very first scenes, which are between himself and his wife, and when he's constantly watching his child in a way which is quite creepy, actually, and quite disturbing, because he becomes obsessed with her, and at one point he's sort of writing this very long story for her, which is trying to explain all the things that have happened, none of which is ever explained. So it may be that, in fact, Kristen Scott Thomas doesn't exist. It may be that the beautiful Polish girl doesn't exist. But by the end of the film...
And it may be that you don't find out.
Yes, and it may be that you don't care to find out about where all these loose ends are supposed to be.
This is sounding tedious.
It was very, very bad.
Is it a thriller or is it an art film?
Oh, it's an art film.
Oh,
God,
please.
Yes. I mean, the poster's quite rather attractive poster for it, which I saw in the papers this morning. I thought, oh, if you didn't know, I hadn't seen it, I'd think that looks quite good. But because it has thriller elements, there is crime involved, and the only entertainment to me was he has this neighbour when he's living in this horrible hovel place, who's this horrendous neighbour who's absolutely horrible, and we won't go into details because it's a bit grim. But their relationship between the two of them is quite funny. But apart